Hello there, welcome to BRUZZ International, the English-speaking show here on BRUZZ. It's great to have you with us for this latest edition, which starts in Sint-Gillis at Jackie.
I come from Brussels. When I was 18, I decided to study law. So I did 5 years in Leuven, then I did a year in London. I worked as a trade lawyer here in Brussels for 4 years. And then suddenly, probably a bit related to COVID, existential questions, I decided to switch my career around and to open this coffee shop. We're in Sint-Gillis. Chaussée Charleroi, very, very lively neighborhood, a lot of things happening, which I love. And so the coffee place is named Jackie. For me, the most important thing is inspiration, that when people arrive, they feel inspired. And that's where the magazines come in. The magazines have a lot of different topics: interior design, traveling, art. And then we have a lot of lifestyle magazines as well. The most famous one is definitely Volg, but then there's the Weekender. And what I love about that is you just open it and you discover something. You have no idea what they decided to talk about, like in their latest issue. And I think it's very important also just in our free time to be able to just discover something new. Big focus obviously is coffee, specialty coffee. Then on top of that we have a lot of sweets, cakes. We have a couple of lunch options, but we are in the process of expanding that, offering some breakfast, some brunch themed ideas, but it's all going to be quite minimalistic. Just want like good things with quality products that people can find here.
Next in this report we catch up with the Swedish artist Marcus Orn.
It's of course terrible to get beaten, but to wait for when that hit is going to come is also even worse sometimes. When you are hit, then at least you know it's going to be quiet for a while, but until next time. What is domestic violence? That can be a lot of things. It doesn't have to be physical violence. It can of course be psychological terror. You know, it has a lot of different colors what it can be. The problem with domestic violence is that it's kind of incorporated in our society. Almost everyone knows someone that has been beaten by their partner. In many ways, you could say that the most unsafe place for a woman to be is very often in her own home. That's where she gets exposed to violence mostly. And that's a kind of a terrible thing to understand. I'm not interested in creating some kind of spectacular violent situation. It's to put the audience to be a voyeuristic, a viewer of violence, to understand how it works. Very often when I'm having conversations or maybe artist talks about this piece, there is someone telling that there is of course also men being exposed to domestic violence, but the numbers are ridiculously low in comparison. It's so deeply ingrown in the heteronormative relationship, and it's also a little bit protected by the structure that we live in. You know, very often you could hear people say, but you know, yeah, he's jealous because he loves you so much, you know. And this is, of course, totally stupid, but, you know, it's some kind of excuse that, oh no, now he got so dark again when he was drinking and thinking that you were flirting with someone else. But, you know, it's just because he loves you. So, yeah, it is a male-driven problem. It's the first time we are invited to Kai Theater and to present this new work.
It is important for Kai Theater to present international work throughout the whole season, and we have been doing that and will do that also in the future. We are working a lot around several red lines. Let's say one is climate change, another one is women and the conditions of women, and that's maybe also why we are presenting this piece here in La Vallée, Marcus Earn, domestic violence.
This work I've created is because I have a close family member that was exposed to very hard domestic violence, so I know the structure, I know how it works. Very often people are not talking about it, even if they know someone is getting beaten. They are not really there to say anything, and I think this is a piece that should open up for a conversation.
Next in this report, we're off to the Cinematheque to hear more about the legendary Italian filmmaker Pasolini. Qu'est-ce que vous avez fait ici?
Je présente un travail autour donc, de Pier Paolo Pasolini, c'est-à-dire que je suis partie depuis plusieurs années, depuis 2014 exactement, suivre ses pas sur une route, la longue route de sable. C'est un itinéraire qu'il avait suivi en 1959, qui donc longe toutes les côtes italiennes. 60 ans plus tard, quasiment, moi je suis repartie sur la même route, avec ma camionnette transformée en mini camping-car, et je suis allée avec le livre. La route. La route est toujours synonyme de liberté, mais aussi d'angoisse, d'inquiétude, liée au départ, à l'éloignement, à la séparation. Son journal de voyage était ma feuille de route et sa poésie mon compagnon de voyage.
Waouh, quelle belle expérience, non?
C'était une expérience magnifique au niveau artistique, puisque voilà, je suis une artiste voyageuse, photographe et vidéaste. Donc c'était un travail extraordinaire, mais surtout une expérience de vie là, vraiment extraordinaire. J'avais l'impression qu'effectivement, j'allais aux endroits où je devais aller pour faire des rencontres assez magiques. Et j'ai rencontré des personnes qui l'avaient connu.
Il était qui exactement?
Donc Pasolini se décrivait lui-même comme poète, mais il était écrivain, poète, journaliste, cinéaste, peintre, dessinateur, qu'on connaît moins. On le connaît plus en tant que cinéaste et écrivain. Il est né en 1922, puisque l'on fête son centenaire, et il a été sauvagement assassiné en 1975. Donc en 53 ans, il a eu le temps de nous livrer une œuvre gigantesque.
You're in charge of programming, so you were the person to decide that you would have this exhibition. Tell us why.
Well, it was obvious for us to have a retrospective of Pier Paolo Pasolini for his 100th birthday, because he's one of the great masters of modern cinema, really like a genius visionary filmmaker.
What is that experience like of watching a Pasolini film here at the Cinematheque?
It's really different, because you have all these cinephiles, like these film fanatics that are here. You have all these articles on the board explaining you what the film is all about, what were the critics at the time it was released. Sometimes you have introductions, you have guests, so it's a whole different experience.
It sounds like perfect escapism. What was it like to work with the artist Chantal Vey?
Oh, it was great. You know, we are working with cinematographers, with film critics, and it's always nice to have another insight, because films are made for the whole of society, and when there is a connection to a filmmaker by an artist, it's already really interesting to broaden the spectrum. Also for our audience, we really hope that the people come and see the movies, of course, but come and discover Chantal's universe.
And finally, Finally, in this report, we get to know Tessa Arcila, an international reporter who was based in Brussels for many years and just left for Sydney.
You know, when someone asks me where I'm from, it's really one of the hardest questions for me to answer because home is such a fluid concept for me. But as a background, I was born in the Philippines. I grew up in Hong Kong, so I went to school there. But then I left for work in 2010. I went to Russia, then moved to Belgium, and that was my first time to actually live in Europe. So Belgium was my first stop. But within that time, since 2011, I lived in the UK, I lived in France, and I came back here. So I'm a foreign journalist, a foreign correspondent. I work for different TV networks. Whenever there's a big story or anything happening, they would be sending me, depending on who I'm working for. That is what took me all across Europe. And Brussels is an excellent base for that, because this is where everything happens. This is where the EU institutions are.
Will be barred from entering the bloc when external borders open on the 1st of July. Belgium is gearing up for the new... This is raw politics. The government is running system, something that Hong Kongers really take pride in. Arrests have already been made so far.
A few years ago, I was hosting a political show we filmed at the European Parliament, and I think that was such a unique opportunity in that we had a platform to talk to all 27 countries. And as you know, if you're living in Brussels, there are opinions that span the entire spectrum. And as a journalist, that is so interesting to see the 27 countries just speaking to each other.
Important people, of course, that we need to hear from is you. Do get in touch with us on Twitter @Euronews with the hashtag.
What brought me to Brussels is work. I was sent here to cover the European Union. I was in Moscow before coming here, and at the time it was when a lot of protests were happening across Europe, the austerity protests, so that was a perfect time to be here. And I think I really enjoyed having a focus, meaning focusing on Europe and understanding it. And also living in Brussels, I met so many people from so many different places, a lot of journalists, of course, diplomats and what have you. And that brought a lot of insight into the work that I do. I think I will always be a journalist, even if I leave this field one day, maybe not, but if I ever do, I think I will always be a journalist. I'm driven by curiosity. This is the reason why I ended up in Brussels with no idea that I would even be here. As far as Brussels is concerned, for me, I feel so at home. It's a perfect city for someone with such a diverse background. People are so welcoming of speaking English with different accents and switching between one language to another. I haven't really seen a city like that. That's what makes Brussels really different.
Well, that's it for this edition of BRUZZ International. Thank you so much for joining us. See you soon.